This month's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, CSM RevUp Academy. CSM RevUp Academy is my complete step-by-step coaching program that helps you elevate your skills and mindset to focus on revenue growth for both your customers and your company. This is a coaching program that walks you through step-by-step on how to align customer success strategies with business objectives, identify upsells, and foster long-term mutually beneficial relationships with your customers. Within CSM RevUp, you will get the framework, strategies, and confidence you need in order to unlock revenue from your customers and hit your NRR goals. And yes, ultimately, you will land your next promotion. If you could use a little extra help with your CS strategy or help hitting your revenue goals this year, and you really want to take advantage of the strategies discussed on this podcast, apply in the comments below. Make sure you are on the wait list because the people who go through CSM RevUp Academy get the support, playbooks, and strategies they need in order to succeed at revenue and customer success. Get on the wait list by going to thecustomersuccesspro.com/CSM-RevUp-Academy or by checking out the link in the show notes of this podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Anika Zubair, and welcome back to the next episode of the Customer Success Pro podcast. I'm a customer success executive leader, award-winning CS strategist, CS coach, and customer success fanatic. I help CS leaders and CSMs build and scale world-class CS processes and teams. I'm a strong believer that customer success is not a destination, but a journey. And it can be a tough journey, but don't worry, I'm here to help. This podcast was created to help make your CS journey a little bit easier to navigate. Join me every month on this podcast where we will dive into the hottest topics in CS, the newest strategies, and the best practices in customer success so you can make your CS journey a little bit easier. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast so that you can continue to learn on this CS journey that we are on together. Welcome back. Today I'm speaking with Madelyn DePrey, who is the VP of Customer Success at Aircall. As Global VP of Customer Success for Aircall, Madelyn manages a sizable revenue-generating team with focus on driving adoption, advocacy, and growth across a large SMB customer base. Through her time at Aircall, Madelyn has been instrumental in developing and segmenting end-to-end customer journey, leveraging the combination of product-led engagement, automation, and human touch. And today we will chat to her all about how leading with value and working with your customers leads to your customers' revenue growth. Welcome, Madelyn, to the podcast. I am so very excited to have you on here today. Before we get into today's topic and get into the details of it, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what it is you do within customer success.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've been a long fan of yours, heard your voice in customer success community throughout the years, and I was thrilled to see you started your very own podcast. So it's an honor to be a guest. I am a podcast connoisseur myself and a big fan of your work. So great to be here. So my name's Madelyn DePrey. I head up customer success globally for Aircall. Aircall is a contact center solution. So we provide the phone system for sales and support teams. Think of us as the voice behind your customer experience. And I sit in New York City, and I've been in customer success for about 10 years.
Amazing. And you had a little bit of an interesting transition into customer success. Tell us a little bit more about what you did before customer success that led you into your role now.
Yes. So prior to my time in customer success, most of my career was actually in hospitality. So from my very first job when I was 15, I worked at the Mall of America in the Twin Cities, where I hail from, and I played SpongeBob. So I actually wore a giant yellow box and I danced around entertaining customers. So kind of hit the ground running in terms of hospitality, greeting customers, getting to know my guests. Throughout the years, I worked in hotel management, which brought me to New York City. And all of the principles of hospitality is around, building experiences, building wow moments for your guests or your customers, and kind of getting to know their needs, anticipating them, and making sure that they're comfortable. If you have, heads in beds, we say in hospitality, and building those experiences. So most of my career was in hospitality, and actually that's how I discovered customer success. I met a founder of a company who was building software for hotels. And I took the leap and joined that company very early. So I was one of the first employees, the first CS employee, to build customer success for hotel software. And I got to work with hotels all over the world and help kind of build technology for them to better, align with their guest experiences. So throughout my career, I've always been in some sort of guest relations, customer relations, and that's how I really discovered CS.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love it. I love speaking to all my guests because everyone comes from such a different background, and hospitality is now, I think, the first on the podcast. But is that what inspired you to start working in customer success? I mean, you mentioned the SpongeBob suit and then into hotels as well. That's like big jump leaps, but you were still serving customers, like you said, at the very beginning of your career until now. Is that kind of like the root reason you are so passionate about everything in customer success?
I think so. It's funny. I actually try to get back to those roots often in customer success, because at the end of the day, it is about building an experience, making sure your customers have trust, making sure that you understand their needs. And that's really the foundation of hospitality. So it's something that gets me excited. I like to get back to that. I think Jeff Bezos actually had a thing in throughout building his Amazon, is that there would always be in a meeting an empty chair in the room to represent your customer. And I think of that in hospitality. It was always about, guest relations and customer experience. And I think we can get back to that a little bit more in B2B customer success. So absolutely, that is something that makes me very passionate about what I do.
Yeah, I do love the empty chair in the room. It's so important to always bring your customer to the table and have those discussions. So love that all of that shaped your career. But let's jump into Aircall and what it is you do there, and a little bit more about the customer success team that you run there. So set the stage for us. What is the team responsible for? What are you held accountable to? Give us a little bit of a background on what it is the team is doing at Aircall.
Sure. So Aircall is a global company. We actually originally were founded in Paris, France. So we're a French company. And we are now all over the world. So I run a global CS and onboarding team. So we have offices here in New York City. We have people distributed all over North America. We're in Australia, in Singapore. We're also all over Europe as well. So my team is responsible for everything post-signature. So once we go through kind of that initial buying process with a customer, then the customer experience is handed over to an onboarding team and a CSM who owns everything from renewal, upsell, and expansion. So we do have a bit of a commercial aspect to our CSM role. But of course, at the end of the day, we're all about driving value for our customers.
Amazing. Did you guys always have a commercial aspect to your CS team, or did this evolve? You've been there for a while. You've seen change, like you said. What kind of drove you to be revenue focused as a team? Was that natural? Was that something that was a progression of where you found yourselves? How did you start being more commercial, I guess?
I feel like it's the age-old debate in customer success. Who owns revenue? What is your responsibility? What does the CSM function mean? I personally am really passionate about customer success team members having that component, but I can see it working both ways depending on the company. At Aircall, we are largely an SMB customer base. So for the most part, it's a lot of scalable activities. A lot of our customers that we work with on a daily basis, the CSMs have pretty large books and they're doing things at scale. And that works quite well in terms of owning that commercial aspect. If we build a relationship, we don't need to then bring in another party. We don't confuse the customer. It's one kind of individual owning that entire experience. So that's kind of always been the case throughout my time at Aircall. In my previous company, we actually built out account management as a separate function. I see both sides, but at Aircall, because we're so SMB, it works quite well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really important to evaluate where you are as a business, as a team. And again, as you said, with the types of customers you work with, it just makes sense. But you did say something earlier that I think leads on to our topic really well, is that you say that you guys are still driving value for customers. And because you drive value with that commercial or revenue mindset that you were just talking about, it ultimately increases revenue for the company as well. So let's dive into a little bit more with leading with value, because I know that's the meaty topic we're going to discuss today. When we spoke before, you shared how passionate you were about with CSMs leading with value. But what does that mean? I think a lot of people want to be doing that, but it could just be a lot of words. So how do you lead with value?
Well, I would argue value is the very reason our function exists. So to me, value is all about aligning the customer's desired outcomes with the delivery of your product and services. So ensure that you know what your customer needs, why they first invested in the product, and then as CSMs, digging deeper from there based on maybe examples from what other customers have been successful in leveraging your product to achieve, to drive more long-term engagement and trust and ultimately ROI for your customers. So value is really understanding your customers' needs, understanding what's possible within your product and services, and then fulfilling those needs in that kind of anticipatory way for your customers and doing it throughout their entire journey.
I love that. You also just highlighted like step by step, a little bit about how you kind of drive value. Are any of those like front and center or the first thing someone should be doing when they're leading with value? Or does it kind of come organically depending on where your customer is in the journey?
I think it's easy to assume it will come organically, but it's so important to be quite intentional about it. So a good example of that is I sit on the floor in New York City. I hear the CSMs on their calls, and sometimes you get into a routine where you have back-to-back calls, and it's easy to just say, okay, so what is it that you're looking to accomplish today? That is not necessarily allowing your customer to think about what's possible. So instead, maybe start the conversation by saying, I see XYZ in your kind of product. I see that you've been leveraging in this way, or I see that you had XYZ support tickets, the questions that you've asked, or I've actually gone back and looked at some of the initial kind of prospecting you did with our sales team to understand that this was a leading indicator of success for you in purchasing our product. And I want to make sure that as we talk today, we are leading with that in mind, and I'm going to help you get to that goal. Or I understand that you had a question about what this button does, but I'm going to help just take a step back and understand what is actually your desired outcome. You're thinking about you in your role as a customer. What is success going to look like for you? And how can I then incorporate it into leveraging our product? So it has to be intentional. And it's so easy to be repetitive and just kind of talk about a button or a click, and thinking back to what does the customer need and driving the conversation accordingly back to those value components is so critical for a CSM.
I love that. I also really love that you gave options for both. Yes, they're successful and they're aligning to their business goals that they shared at the very beginning, but also if they're not doing well or if they're not using the product to the way is expected, there is a way to ask value-driven questions to get them back on track, and making sure that every question that you do ask your customer is coming back to their goals and their outcomes, rather than just, like you said, sharing how to use a product or what to do next. It's always driven back to their values and goals, and you helping or almost being consultative with your customer to end up going down the path of showing them value with use cases or with whatever else is at hand to make sure that they're really using all parts of your product based on their needs. So I really, really love that. I think that's so critical and probably underdone in customer success. So glad you're listening into calls and sharing that with your CSMs as they carry a quota. But most CSMs don't carry a quota, and I think yours do. So what does that look like?
Well, they do. But again, if you're leading with value, that quota piece is going to come naturally. So here kind of in our customer success function, as mentioned, our CSMs do own all of the commercial activities after the first initial 3-month period of a customer's journey. And so that means that they are responsible for identifying if a customer could leverage from an upsell, maybe going up in a package to benefit from more features. If we could sell them an add-on, maybe looking at and understanding that they like our analytics, they would benefit from a more robust, more expensive analytics package. Also managing and negotiating the renewal. And so what that means in sort of the customer journey is we're building the relationship, we're leading with value. When we get to the point of the customer needing to negotiate or needing to be able to close a contract, the CSM has done all of the legwork to get there. Then they have the tools to effectively actually manage the negotiation and close those upsells, those expansions, those renewals. And so they do carry a quota, but the quota is not just a straight, here's a number, go sell every month like you see in an AE function. The quota is actually a mix. So our comp structure looks like a combination of a percentage of churn. So there's a churn target you try to get above. You try not to have below a certain amount of churn. There is a expansion. So we kind of isolate that expansion number. So that comes with selling add-ons or going up in price per license, or actually identifying that they have a sales team using the product, but let's go sell on that support team. So you add license counts. And then there's that contraction piece. So minimizing any downsell, minimizing customers removing licenses. And so those 3 components are isolated. So let's say I'm a CSM and I have a quarter where I have a really big churn. And unfortunately, that's going to kind of wipe out my churn bucket. But because I have two other components of my compensation, I am still motivated to protect my contraction and to get my expansion number. So we try to make it fair and think about the holistic net retention, but CSMs will have quarters where there are accounts that might kind of completely skew one component, and they're still motivated to go after those other components. So it's a mix, and ultimately it's all about net retention. What is the net outcome of your customers?
I love that. I think every CSM is the CEO of their own book of business. So as a CEO of all these customers you work with, you have to pull the right levers at the right time. And you just said that there are multiple ways that they can still carry and hit their quota and ultimately drive net retention. But it doesn't focus on just one thing that you have to do again and again and again. It requires you to use critical thinking. It requires you to really do white space analysis with your customers. It really helps your CSM kind of look at it holistically rather than, okay, this one customer is going to churn. Oh no, I need to just save this one customer. No, you need to look at your whole book of business. Of course, try to help that churning customer, but also help the customers that are succeeding as well. So that's really great to hear. But I think some CSMs today have never carried a quota. They've never had any revenue targets. They've never owned anything in revenue. CS sometimes naturally started out of more of a support function. And some CSMs today are given revenue numbers, but they're totally afraid of owning that number. You mentioned tools earlier or strategies around the renewal process. How do you recommend a CSM get comfortable with renewals or just revenue number in general?
Yes, I love that question. And I understand the hesitation. And I think, for me, coming from hospitality, it was always about being a people pleaser. And so I was really afraid of that sales aspect. So I myself can personally kind of understand and empathize with some of the fear that might come around that. That said, it's quite similar to all of the, when you think about how do we get to a point of contract negotiation, how do we get to a point of closing, all of the things that we do to build a relationship and to drive value back to those value components ultimately are the same tools we need to successfully close contracts and successfully negotiate and get to a mutually agreed upon outcome with your customer. So what I mean by that is, let's think about what are the aspects that work well in a sales process. Well, there's something called multi-threading, which means that you don't just have one relationship with one stakeholder. You need to, especially nowadays, have relationship with multiple stakeholders, because now often you'll see it will take multiple individuals within an organization to come to a decision. So that means if I talk to a sales director who's using Aircall to monitor their sales team and their sales team is doing outbound calling on Aircall, I also maybe need to build a relationship with the CRO or with a chief technology officer to ensure that they understand the value and they will ultimately be making a decision and signing that contract. So there's multi-threading. There's also understanding and uncovering pain points. So this is something we call gap selling, right? So if we say, okay, what are your pains? Asking those questions, and how can I sell into that gap and help you understand that you're going to ultimately be able to be successful with this solution. So those are some of the things that come to mind that are so important in risk negotiation and retention negotiation that work well in owning a quota in that commercial aspect of being a customer success manager. So I think the fear is understandable, but the ability to leverage some of those tools that we need on a very, very regular basis will help. And also just training and practice and coaching. And we do a lot of call recording, listening, and peer reviews to help the CSMs feel comfortable with that number.
I love that. I love that you guys are owning that CS uses sales methodology or sales tactics in customer success. I think a lot of times people see sales as sleazy or oh no, we're not going to do that. That's going to ruin the customer relationship. But you were just so adamant about, hey, we can use this in order to help us drive value with our customers. The multi-threading, I think that's so critical and so important, probably underdone in customer success. If your one champion leaves, what do you do then? So you should definitely have multiple contacts within a business. I think that's mission critical to building a strategic relationship with your customers. But I think sometimes these methodologies and these tactics get kind of shunned because everyone sees it as bad, or just sales being the type of people that are trying to sell something that a customer doesn't need. But that's not the case here. You are trying to find those gaps, like you mentioned, and fill the gaps in order to see your customer more successful with your product. So I really love that you really shared how sales can come into CS in a different way. You mentioned call recordings. That seems like one way that you're training your CSMs on all the commercial and revenue-minded activities that they're doing. Is there anything else that you guys are doing in order to make sure your CSMs are fully trained and feel comfortable in the conversations they're having?
Well, pulling from my hospitality days and pulling from my SpongeBob days, where we have to kind of think on our feet, we also do some improvisation training. So we think about improvisation is all about thinking on your feet, being able to kind of come up with something on the fly, being thrown curveballs and being able to react to them. So throughout my career, I've brought in improv specialists to do trainings with the CSMs, which is really interesting. It's great. I highly recommend it for any sales or customer-facing teams. We also leverage a lot of role-playing, right? So kind of also acting improv. We try to get the teams together, whether it's over Zoom calls or in person, which is ideal. And we sit in a room and we have somebody play the customer and somebody play the CSM, and we go back and forth and we throw each other curveballs and we try to think on the spot. And then once we've gotten through that session, we kind of debrief together and we said, okay, what really worked? Where were there some opportunities? What do we want to try next time? So that constant kind of peer review, role playing, improv, all of that I think is really helpful. And then not shying away from really thinking about what's working in the sales organization, listening to sales calls, sitting, near the sales team to hear them and hear their negotiations and leveraging some of the tactics that work well there. I will say personally, I'm still learning, and I've learned a lot by listening to my counterparts in the sales team about asking tough questions. So one example of that is we've gotten the CSMs to just say, during an annual business review, which comes about 6 months prior to renewal, how likely are you to renew if your renewal was today? And that's kind of scary, but it's so powerful to get that answer. And then I have 6 months to negotiate from there and try to win them back, or maybe add and sell them more if they're already pretty decided that they're going to renew. So those are some examples of what we leverage on a daily basis.
I love everything that you said. That tough question, so important. I tell all my CSMs as well, you have to ask the tough questions. Otherwise, you're never going to find out what a customer really wants. We have to stop assuming in customer success it's helping no one. And also, I really love that you said keep on learning. There's nothing wrong with continuous learning. And I think all of us think that we've got it figured out, or maybe I know how to work with this customer, but there's always strategies and techniques that we can continue to learn and upskill ourselves. And you continue to upskill yourself from your sales leader within your organization. And I think CS can benefit greatly from embracing that and really understanding what other functions or other people do within the business to really help a customer succeed. So really love that. No ego. I think it's awesome that the entire Aircall team is doing improv. That sounds so much fun to be involved in that. But another thing we talked about before, Madelyn, was that you as a CS function embrace the top of the funnel in customer success. Before we dive into what that is and how you guys do it, what is top of the funnel? What does that mean?
Sure. So top of the funnel is a term used in sales or marketing to describe that initial stage of the customer journey. So this stage is all about creating awareness and making the customer understand what problem your product or your service can provide, it can solve. And so think about it as a consumer. I like to give this example. So I'm sure many of your listeners, I'm guilty myself, has fallen for targeted Instagram ads, right? So if you're looking at Instagram, you're scrolling, and all of a sudden I see a pop-up for the Nordstrom anniversary sale, which is timely here in the States. And the sales is telling me that there's a great dress that I need for an upcoming wedding, right? So just as a very specific example, at the top of the funnel, the awareness stage, I get excited. I see the bright colors. I like it. I'm going to click into it. And then I'm going to maybe look at it, understand more about what it is and purchase it. And I get excited about the delivery of that package. So when you think about it in B2B, the top of the funnel is a stage where your customer, through whatever channel they come to you or you come to them, inbounding or outbounding, is made aware of your products and services. Then they are probably working either in a product-led way through the product or with a salesperson to understand what it is that the product offers. And that salesperson may be asking them deep discovery to say, okay, what is it you need? Building that trust and selling them that this tool is going to solve some of those pain points they have or address some of their needs. So that's that top of funnel. It's the exciting stage. It's the awareness stage. It's when we're doing discovery, we're building trust, and hopefully then we are closing that contract. And so I think about all of those things that work so well in that top of funnel. You look at a funnel that customers coming in and then it goes down into the process. And we as CSMs shouldn't shy away from embracing those tactics that work so well. Discovery, aha moments, information sharing, building trust, to then incorporate into risk mitigation, into ongoing retention activities, into expansion and renewal. That's kind of how I think about top of funnel translating into the entire customer journey.
I love that. I also love that you just said top of funnel that translates into everything a CSM is already doing. Like that discovery, that uncovering that you were just talking about, it can directly translate if you're asking the right questions to, oh no, a customer might churn because they're not as excited about a new feature release, or they're really frustrated with how something's working right now. That's risk mitigation once you do the right discovery. Or on the other hand, you do the right discovery and you learn that your customers may be expanding into a new market, or maybe their team needs more Aircall licenses because you've asked the right questions, which then led to you then moving into a upsell conversation. But it's so cool that you embrace so many sales tactics within the CS function, because again, I think a lot of people shy away because they think there's such a difference between sales and customer success. But ultimately, the whole company is driving revenue forward. So I think it's awesome that you guys do embrace this. If you were to recommend any CSM that's going to start to embrace customer or sales tactics in customer success, which one would you say is the most important to start with?
I really like to talk a lot about solution selling. So instead of selling a feature, we are selling a solution. And I think that kind of back to that conversation around value, we assume that comes organically with customer success, but it's easy to lose track of that. So it needs to be quite intentional. So that looks like truly understanding, asking open-ended questions, taking time to know the persona you're speaking to. So a sales leader is going to have a very different need than a support leader, right? How do I understand what they need, what their pain points are, get that understanding first, and then sell that solution instead of saying, I want to click this button. Well, let's have a better understanding of what the solution is going to offer you and really focusing on that solution selling. And I think that's an important thing too to remember in sort of if you have that commercial responsibility, instead of going right to that price point. So let's say you're in a negotiation and it's a renewal. And by the way, downselling is still a selling, right? So if they're coming to a renewal and there's risk of churn, maybe you want to offer them a lower price point. You're negotiating a lower price point. And I see CSMs come to me and they say, okay, can I go this low? Can I match a competitor? First, get back to the solution. Have we understood what they need? Have we understood what that competition is? They're going to be losing if they go to that competition. Let's lead first with the solution and then with the price. That's an important sales tactic, getting back to that solution selling that is so critical to success in customer success who own commercial quotas. So that's what would be when my number one is solution selling.
All great tips, but some customer success managers have been just smacked with a revenue target. They've been told, okay, this year now we're focusing on renewals or having a renewal target at this rate or upsells at this rate. And sometimes it's quite intimidating. It's amazing that you as a leader have taken the time to help coach, train your customer success managers on sales tactics, but also just how to embrace revenue. But I think some of the pain points is that CSMs aren't trained on it as often as they should be in customer success within their companies. If you were giving advice to a CSM outside of Aircall, because it sounds like you guys have a great coaching program, but if you're giving advice to people outside of your organization on how to kind of get started with this, where should they best go? What's kind of like the ways that they can upskill themselves if their company is not helping?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think two things come to mind. So the first thing is, I think it's really easy to feel detached from that number and not have a clear understanding of how to get there. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're given an expansion number. Don't be afraid to ask your leader, can you help me break this down? I'm being told to upsell this amount this month. Can you walk me through the logic and the math and how you see me getting there? And hopefully, if it's a good leader, they've taken the time to say, okay, this number equals this amount of add-ons or this amount of new licenses, which if you divide that by your customer base, the saturation percentage is going to be this. If we divide that by your time, ideally you should be closing 2 a week, right? So help ask that question, put it back on your leader to understand the logic so you can better connect and make that target much more granular. So that's my first piece of advice. My second is, by the way, thank you. We're not great at coaching all the time at Aircall. We're still figuring it out, so we're not perfect either. But I think what's worked well is to not be afraid to sit next to your sales counterparts. Listen to them. Understand what's working for them. Or go outside your organization and listen to revenue podcasts. Listen to sales leaders. Spend some time researching some of that. Don't shy away from that. Again, coming back to that constant learning. So take it upon yourself to find those things. There's a lot of free resources out there. Some of these sales methodology models have been around for much longer than customer success. So there's a lot out there. So kind of go take it upon yourself to find that and learn from that, either from your internal counterparts or from the broad world out there of all those resources that are free and available.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Listen, Madelyn, we can sit here and talk about value selling and customer success and how your time at Aircall has really shaped what the customer success team is doing. But I need to start wrapping us up. And I just have one quick question. If you were to look back on the last few years of your career journey and your time at Aircall, is there anything you would change or maybe do sooner as you built out the CS function?
Yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit about not being so shy about influencing the product roadmap. So when I started, there were some kind of gaps we identified in terms of where we were losing customers or where our competition caught up or where we're falling behind. And I think it was hard for me as a leader to really get very data-backed and granular and to not be shy about saying, these are the investments we can make in order to sort of bridge the gap in turn. It's not going to be everything because there's other things that we need to solve in terms of product and packaging, et cetera. But being quicker to partner with the product team, I think would have been beneficial. And it's working quite well now, but I wish I would have done that sooner.
Great tip. I also love that you partnered with both product and sales, but you were challenging them as well. You were saying, hey, we need to build this sooner, or we need to do something to influence the roadmap in order to drive value for our customers. You said the same thing about CSMs. They shouldn't be afraid to really partner with their leader or push back or really challenge their leader on the revenue targets that they're being given or anything that they're being asked of. So that's a really great tip, I think, overall. But Madelyn, we have come to the end where we are going to start our quick fire questions where I challenge all my guests to answer the next few questions in a sentence or less. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. My first question for you is, if you could predict the future, what do you think CS will focus on next year?
I think we're going to see the lines blur a little bit between CS and product, particularly in digital-led motions like digital customer success. Product and CS people will come together in a new and exciting way.
Ooh, I love that. And I agree, especially in product-led growth companies or companies that are focused on like a freemium or SMB model. I think that can be really powerful. Love that. Okay, next question is, which app or software do you use every single day of the week on your phone or on your laptop, and why?
Slack, all day, every day, around the clock. We're a global company. Slack.
Easy answer. Next question is, if you could change one thing about CS, what would it be?
I think removing the fear and embracing having a seat at the table. Trying to keep it to one sentence. I could say a lot about that, but you get it.
That is such a powerful sentence. We'll leave it at that. Last question is, who should be my next podcast guest?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would love for you to chat with somebody in customer marketing. That's a function that we're really excited about here at Aircall. So our customer marketing director, Kristen Smith, is phenomenal. I'd love to connect you with her or any other customer marketing leaders out there.
Ooh, I've heard that before, actually. A lot of people have said, like, we need to start to blur the lines between marketing and CS and how marketing can be a real asset. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you so much, Madelyn. And thank you so much for your energy and sharing all your tips and tricks with my listeners today. If anyone has any follow-up questions or wants to get in touch, what is the best way to connect with you?
Oh, thank you so much. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn, or you can find me at Aircall. But it was an absolute privilege to be here today, and I'm always trying to build my CS network, so feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Customer Success Pro podcast today. I hope you learned something new to take back to your team and your company. If you enjoyed today's episode, please can you take 1 minute to give me a positive review on Apple Podcasts? It takes a lot of time and energy to create an episode, and I want to continue to create more for you. But it would be great to know that you are enjoying these episodes. Also, do not forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, as I release a new podcast every month. And if you have any topics that you would like me to discuss in the future, or you would like to be a guest on this podcast, please feel free to reach out. All my contact details are in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it, because sharing is caring. Thanks again for listening, and tune in next time for more on customer success. Cheers to your CS journey, and catch you next time.